Hey adventurers, so today is going to be another book review. This is going to be for Quaint Creatures, Magical and Mundane, a sideways tale by Andrew D. Meredith. So this is a fantasy book, that's clear. That's an obvious genre, an easy genre to pick out for this book, but the rest of them are a little bit more difficult. It's kind of cozy, it's a little bit of a mystery, it's a little bit of like a progression fantasy to some degree, although not really because it's the character isn't leveling up, but there it feels a little bit like that, or a little bit like D&D or something like that. So Quaint Creatures, Magical and Mundane is a fairly recent release, not anymore, but it's a fairly recent release by Andrew D. Meredith, meaning this year. It was released this year. This is a sideways tale, which is a brand new fantasy universe that Andrew D. Meredith is creating to set stories in. And these can be whatever types of stories that he wants to, and a lot of them will probably end up being like cozy murder mystery type fantasy stories or something along those lines. But he has, within this world, he has, or this universe or whatever you want to call it, he has the ability to tell whatever story he could possibly think of. So this is a very cozy fantasy story in many ways about a magical veterinarian and the various magical pets that are brought to him, which is quite a bit different than anything that I've ever encountered before or anything that I've ever read. I know that he took a lot of inspiration from things like all things great and small, all creatures great and small, all things bright and beautiful, and all creatures great and small, I believe, are two of the books in the series, something like that. Anyways, he took a lot of inspiration from that when creating this, and that's basically the idea. There's a magical veterinarian rather than a real veterinarian. He's what race is he? Giant? He's either a giant or some other big, I can't remember, but he's some big fantasy creature like a giant or a ogre or a troll or something like that. I don't remember which one he is. Once again here though, Meredith proves how good of a storyteller he is. I already know that I love his writing, and I love his books in his Calatian saga, or in the world of Calatai, and so I figured that I would probably enjoy this, but I keep saying that I need to read more from him, as in different series, before I can actually put him as a favorite author. So my original thought was, once I read Thrice and Fourscored, which is his Needle and Leaf series, that would do that, and then I could consider him one of my favorite authors. But since I haven't gotten to those yet, I ended up doing this one, and since I had the audiobook for Quaint Creatures, I was like, perfect, this counts. And so now I can officially put him on as one of my favorite authors, which is awesome. I'm so happy that I can finally say that, especially with a book that I didn't know if it would work for me, and I'll get to more on that in a second here. So I went into this book not really knowing what to expect from it, but I was hoping that I'd enjoy it based on who the author was, what I know about his writing and the way that he writes and the way that he tells stories. I was hoping that I'd enjoy it, but I didn't know. And that's really the case with every book that I've ever read, is I don't know if I'm going to enjoy it until I've read it. And I didn't know how he would tell a story about a veterinarian. That's a little bit of a weird profession to include in a fantasy world, but I actually ended up, it worked really well with the story that was being told. But the way he takes and blends this sort of like a RPG or a dungeon crawler-ish story with a cozy fantasy feel ends up working really well. And I think obviously that's only something that you can do in fantasy. You can't do that in any other genre except maybe sci-fi, which is very similar to fantasy in so many aspects. So obviously that's not something that you could do in literary fiction or something like that, is tell a fantasy story, a dungeon crawler fantasy story with magical elements and a giant veterinarian. It's just like this, that can't happen because those things don't exist in a non-speculative world. As always though, Meredith brings in amazing world building and fantasy creatures, but then invests you in the lives of these characters and their stories. It goes beyond just, here's some cool world building. He actually builds these characters that are interesting. And of course, you have your main characters, which is, I wish I could remember his name, Norik Softstep is the main character. And of course, that's your main character. That's who you're following. This is a fairly short book. Let's see. It's about 228 pages. Page 228 is the end. So it's a short book. And so what he does is, instead of focusing on a large cast of characters, he takes one character, which is this Snorik Sofsep, and tells a story about him and invests you in his world and his life, as well as bringing in these other characters from around the story in order to help flesh out the world, help flesh out the story, actually create a story, because there wouldn't be one if you didn't include these other characters. And so it's more than just a unique fantasy world, it's also a character-driven story, as all of his always are. I don't really think that cozy fantasy is a genre that I am going to just like, oh, this is my favorite genre or anything like that ever. And I don't even know that I will generally enjoy it as a genre. But with this one, with Quaint Creatures, Magical and Mundane, he just had to write a title that was a tongue twister. Quaint Creatures, Magical and Mundane, A Sideways Tale. With this book specifically, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the cozy aspects of it. I enjoyed the fact that it was this is about a magical vet, a veterinarian for magical creatures. And that's so interesting. It's so different. And I just really ended up enjoying that. And so I guess what I'm learning is that if Meredith is doing it, I will probably enjoy it. And that's a great thing to know. I'm always looking for these authors that I can just pick up a book and be like, I don't care what it's about, I'm going to enjoy it. And that really does seem to be the case here with this one. This is genuinely just a really enjoyable, nice book. And of course, the audiobook, narrated by the author himself, is fantastic as well. You can't get away from how good of a narrator and storyteller he is. And then when you combine those things for him to tell his own stories, it just adds an extra layer, because then you understand what he was thinking when he was writing those books. So yeah, of course, I'm going to recommend the audiobooks, and I'm going to recommend reading his books in any way that you can, but the audiobooks for them are fantastic. Anyways, that is my review of Quaint Creatures, Magical and Mundane, A Sideways Tale by Andrew D. Meredith. I'm going to have to talk to him about that title, because that is a mouthful. But thank you guys for watching. If you're liking what you're seeing from an Erudite adventure, please like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you guys again soon. Stay well.